My first mistake was using Craigslist. My second was ignoring my gut. I was 23, just graduated, and moving to Columbia, Missouri for my first real job. I needed an apartment, fast, and the ad I found seemed perfect. A 2-bedroom downtown, and the roommate, Jessica, seemed totally normal over email. When I moved in, she was nice enough. A little quiet, maybe, but I was busy with my new job, so I didn't mind. We had separate lives. She said she was a freelance graphic designer, worked odd hours from home. It made sense. She was always in her room or out meeting clients. The rent was paid on time and the apartment was kept clean. For the first 2 months, it was fine. The first crack appeared when I got a piece of her mail by mistake. It was addressed to a different name, Amanda. I didn't think much of it, just figured it was junk mail for a previous tenant. I left it on the counter, but when I came home later, it was gone. Jessica never mentioned it. Then, things got weird with her car. She always parked in the same spot, an old blue Honda. One morning, I noticed the license plate was different. It was a subtle change, just a few numbers off from what I remembered. I told myself I must have just misremembered. Who pays that much attention to their roommate's license plate? But the feeling that something was off started to grow. She was obsessively private. Her bedroom door was always locked, even when she was just in the kitchen. She paid her half of the rent and utilities in cash, always in a plain white envelope slipped under my door on the first of the month. She never had friends over, not once. The real shift happened about 3 months in. I was working late and came home around 10 p.m. The apartment was dark, and I assumed she was asleep. I went to the kitchen to get a glass of water, and that's when I saw the light from her room was on. Not the main light, but a small flickering light, like a candle, and I heard her talking. I know, I shouldn't have listened, but her voice was different. It wasn't the quiet, reserved Jessica I knew. This was a hard, cold voice. She was on the phone. I only caught fragments. Can't stay here much longer. The plates are getting hot. I need a new drop. I froze. Plates? Like license plates? Drop? As in, what? I quietly backed away and went to my room, my heart hammering. I told myself I was overreacting. That graphic designer was just slang for something. The next weekend, I was watching a local news recap, something I rarely do. It was one of those most wanted segments. They were profiling a woman wanted in connection with a string of armed robberies and check fraud schemes across 3 states. They showed a photo. It was her. It was Jessica. Except the news called her Amanda Johnson, the same name from the mail. I felt the blood drain from my face. I was living with a fugitive, a potentially violent fugitive. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold my phone. I locked my bedroom door, turned off my light, and pretended to be asleep. I didn't know what to do. What if she heard me? What if she knew I knew? I spent the whole night wide awake, staring at my door, listening to every creak in the apartment. I heard her get up around 3 a.m., walk to the kitchen, open and close the fridge, and then go back to her room. It was the longest night of my life. The second the sun came up, I grabbed my purse, my keys, and my work laptop. I didn't pack a bag. I just walked out, went to my car, and drove. I drove straight to the nearest police station. I must have sounded like a lunatic rambling to the officer at the front desk. But when I showed him the news segment on my phone and gave him my address, his entire demeanor changed. They sent a patrol car to my apartment. I waited at the station, numb. About an hour later, an officer came back. She was in custody. They had found her packing a bag, ready to run. In her room, they found 3 different fake IDs, a stack of stolen credit cards, and 2 different license plates hidden under her mattress. She had been on the run for almost a year. My apartment was just the latest hideout. I never went back, not really. The police escorted me a few days later to get my essential belongings. I left the furniture, I broke my lease, paid the fine, and moved into a tiny, expensive studio apartment. For the first month, I slept with a chair wedged under the doorknob. I never used Craigslist for a roommate ever again. When I got accepted to university, I was most excited about living in the dorms. I pictured late-night study sessions, movie nights, and making a best friend for life. I got assigned a roommate, Sam. On move-in day, she seemed perfect. She was bubbly, friendly, and we liked all the same bands. We immediately clicked. For the first semester, it was exactly what I'd hoped for. We went to parties together, complained about classes, and shared clothes. She was like the sister I never had. I was Meg. She was Sam. and we were inseparable. The problem started, as they so often do, with a boy. I started dating a guy named Ben from my sociology class. He was great, and we spent a lot of time together. Sam was supportive at first, but then she got clingy. If Ben and I were watching a movie in our room, she'd sit on her bed and just watch us, not saying anything. It was uncomfortable. Then my clothes started to go missing. Not just borrowed, but gone. A specific blue sweater I loved, my favorite pair of jeans. I'd ask Sam, and she'd just shrug. No idea, Meg. Maybe you lost them at the laundry? But a week later, I'd see her walking back from the library wearing my sweater. When I confronted her, she'd laugh and say, "Oh my God, I totally forgot. My bad, it was annoying, but I brushed it off." One weekend, I came back from visiting my parents and she was standing in our room, her hair a cheap, brassy orange imitation of my color. She just smiled and said, "We're twins now." I felt a genuine chill run down my spine. That's when Ben pulled me aside. He looked worried. "Meg," he said, "this is going to sound crazy, but Sam has been messaging me." He showed me his phone. She had created a new social media profile. The profile picture was an old photo of me, but the name was Sam. She had been messaging Ben, pretending to be me, saying things like, "Ben, I'm breaking up with you. I've met someone else." When that didn't work, she started messaging him as herself, telling him I was cheating on him, that I was a terrible person. I was horrified. We confronted her together. She broke down crying, saying she was just lonely, that she felt left out. She apologized so much that I actually felt guilty. I'm not a confrontational person, so I forgave her. I told her we just needed to set boundaries. That was my biggest mistake. A week later, I woke up in the middle of the night. It was that disorienting 3 a.m. darkness. I felt wrong. My head was fuzzy and I felt incredibly groggy. I sat up and the room was spinning. I looked over at Sam's bed. She wasn't there. I heard a noise, a quiet click. I looked toward the door. In the dim light from the hallway, I saw her. She was standing right next to my bed, holding her phone. She was taking pictures of me while I slept. I screamed. I scrambled back, hitting my head on the wall. She just stood there, her face illuminated by her phone screen, with this calm, almost blank expression. "What are you doing?" I yelled. She didn't answer. She just slowly lowered the phone and whispered, "I just wanted to see what you looked like. You always look so peaceful." That was it. I ran out of the room in my pajamas. I went straight to Ben's dorm and collapsed. The next day I found out why I was so groggy. I had a prescription for anxiety medication, just a low dose to take as needed. The bottle was on my desk. It was empty. She had been drugging me. I went to the resident advisor, to the campus police, to the dean. It took 2 days, but they finally moved her. The investigation found she had a history of this. She had been kicked out of her high school for a similar stalking incident. I finished the year in a single room. I had trouble sleeping for a long time after that. The worst part wasn't the hair, or the clothes, or even the drugging. It was the pictures. The campus police made her delete them, but I still have nightmares. I wonder how many nights she stood there watching me before I finally woke up. We were supposed to be friends. We lived in a 4-bedroom suite, me and 3 other girls. It was my sophomore year. The suite was nice, but one of the roommates, let's call her Haley, was difficult from day one. She was messy, loud, and constantly starting drama. But the other 2 girls and I were close, so we just tried to ignore her. About 6 weeks into the semester, I started getting sick. It wasn't just a cold. It was a deep, body-aching sickness. I had constant splitting headaches, nausea, and a horrible metallic taste in my mouth that I couldn't get rid of. I felt exhausted, like my bones were made of lead. I went to the campus health center and they were baffled. They tested me for mono, for the flu. All negative. They told me it was probably stress and to get more rest. But it just got worse. I was missing classes. I stopped eating because everything tasted like I was chewing on aluminum foil. My parents were worried. I was worried. One night, I was lying in bed, feeling miserable. The other 2 roommates, Anna and Chloe, were at the library. It was just me and Haley in the suite. I heard her in the kitchen, opening and closing the fridge. A few minutes later, she came into our shared living room holding a bottle of water. "Hey," she said, her voice unusually sweet. "You look awful. I'm grabbing a water. You want one?" I was so thirsty and my head was pounding. Yeah, thanks, I managed to say. She went back to the kitchen, and I heard the click of the fridge door. She came back and handed me an unopened bottle of water. I chugged about half of it. It tasted off. But at that point, everything tasted off. I figured it was just me. I felt even worse the next day. Anna and Chloe came back and I was telling them how sick I was. I mentioned the weird tasting water. Anna frowned. That's weird, she said. Haley offered me some water yesterday too. I thought it tasted funny, so I spat it out. Suddenly, Chloe's eyes went wide. Guys, where does Haley keep her cleaning supplies? It was a random question, but we all knew the answer. Haley was a clean freak, but only about her own things. She kept a personal caddy of cleaning supplies, including a big spray bottle of Windex under the kitchen sink. My blood ran cold. No, I whispered. No. Anna, who was braver than me, went to the kitchen. She pulled out the Windex bottle. It was half empty. Then she looked in the recycling bin. It was filled with dozens of empty single-serve water bottles. We didn't know what to do. We couldn't believe it. We thought we were just being paranoid. But that night, we set up a plan. We told Haley we were all going to a late-night study session. But Anna and I left, looped around the building, and hid in the dark stairwell across from our suite. Chloe stayed inside, pretending to be asleep in her room. We waited for almost an hour, cramped and silent. Then, we heard our suite door open. It was Haley. We watched through the crack in the stairwell door. She looked both ways down the hall, then went to the communal kitchen at the end of the hall. She came back with a box of syringes. That was it. We ran to the RA's office and called the police. When the police arrived, they searched our suite. What they found was so much worse than we imagined. Haley was not just putting Windex in my water. She was using the syringes to inject the glass cleaner into my food, into my half-gallon of milk, into my yogurt, into my leftovers. She was also spitting in my food and spraying it with window cleaner. She was also messing with my roommate Anna. She had been taking Anna's toothbrush and rubbing it on the floor, on the toilet, and on her private parts, then putting it back for Anna to use. She was arrested that night. The police asked her why. She just shrugged and said she was a bad roommate and that we deserved it. For what? For asking her to clean her dishes? It turned out the metallic taste in my mouth, the nausea, the headaches, they were all classic symptoms of ingesting the chemicals in glass cleaner. The doctors told me that if I had kept consuming it, it could have led to permanent kidney or liver failure, or worse. She was charged with multiple felonies. I had to testify. I don't know what was scarier, being sick or sitting in a courtroom watching her smirk at me. She was a sociopath. You see these things in movies, but you never ever think you'll end up living with one.